The MCU has reached Phase 5. Did you even know that? It feels like yesterday when we all went to go see Avengers Endgame together, waiting in long lines just to see our favorite heroes give it their all one final time. And now we all collectively groan at the thought of whatever this is. And although the MCU has had its fair share of downs these past few years, I haven't rewatched earlier phases since I don't even know when. Phase 1 started in 2008 with Iron Man, and the 6 movies that make up this phase I haven't seen since I was a kid. And with Robert Downey Jr. coming back as Dr.Doom, and the noticeable shift the MCU is taking towards nostalgia and not storytelling, really? I figured it would be fun to go back and check out Phase 1. So I raised the question, was the MCU Phase 1 actually good? Let's find out.
We can talk, sir.
Oh, I see, so it's personal?
No, you intimidate them.
Good God, you're a woman.
Yeah, this movie slaps. It's been a minute since I rewatched Iron Man, and returning to this movie was an absolute blast. It's hard to remember a time when this franchise was just a group of people risking it all on one character, let alone one controversial actor, and just hoping it would work. But it did, and it did really well. I'm a huge fan of how grounded this movie feels, how simple the stakes really are. It's simply about a business weapons tycoon wanting to change the way he does business, and his antagonists are people within his own company working against him. It's nice. You don't see that often anymore. It's usually something world-ending or universe-changing now. Having this movie feel so self-contained was comforting as well. I forgot how good it feels watching an MCU movie that doesn't feel like a chore, so it can lead to another one later on, but felt like its own thing, and that's truly in part to the story. It's really well told and laid out. I love how the opening of the movie throws you right into the action, having Tony's Humvee get ambushed and exploded, seeing Tony explode himself, which leads to his first arc reactor in his chest. Just awesome stuff. The entire opening sequence where Tony is shown being a Casanova smart asshole was great too, because it showcased how he thought what he was doing was okay, and it took for him to see his own weapons being used against him for him to realize it needed to stop. I loved everything about the cave sequence. Him building the suit for the first time is just peak aura.
Huh? Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
Getting to know about Yinsen was great too, because Tony was able to see how someone was impacted by his own technology far away from home. Plus it led to one of the greatest lines in the MCU with,
"Thank you for saving me. Don't waste it. Don't waste your lives."
And the action sequence preceding that is incredible. The way the Mark 1 armor looks is so cool, and seeing it explode all of his weapons was eye candy. Seeing Tony eventually upgrade his suits to the Mark 2 and Mark 3 armors was a sight to see, especially because those suits are so goddamn sexy, man. How he went from this to this is beyond me. It looks so much better here. Especially when Tony hunts down the terrorists in Yinsen's hometown and just murders them. I swear we will never see a superhero do this in a movie ever again. Absolutely bonkers. Remember in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier when John Walker just killed one terrorist and the entire world got upset over it? Iron Man just took down like 25 in 5 minutes. However, side characters are really great in this too. Pepper Potts was a treat to see go back and forth with Tony, as well as Rhodey, who was played by a whole different person at one point in Terrence Howard, but he did a good job regardless, and I enjoyed Stain as the antagonist. Again, he was a greedy business tycoon that was just jealous of Tony's power and money. He wanted to run all of Stark Industries, so he had to take out Tony to do it. I like how it led to him wanting to abuse the arc reactor tech for warfare, and while the final battle is just a big CGI fight, it wasn't the worst thing to watch when everything beforehand was great. Tony's overall arc from the start to wanting to fight against tyranny is very well handled. Yeah, this movie is really good. I'd give it like a 9 out of 10. I'm glad I was able to rewatch this movie again. It's truly fun to go back and watch something that only wanted to be a good movie and not something that needed to make them $1 billion.
Yellow tape around his body.
This movie rocks. I have always been an avid supporter of this film since I was just a wee child. It's just pure, unfiltered Hulk action for an hour and 50 minutes. Like, we haven't gotten this since... It's been 17 years. Like I mentioned before, I really dig this movie.
This right here is my favorite thing.
It has no problem understanding its central focus in that Bruce is a tormented soul having to deal with the untimely side effects of the Hulk being inside him. Yes, we've gotten that a bit in some of the Avengers movies, but it's fallen deep on the wayside since the first one.
Damn.
This film really brutalizes how monstrous the Hulk is, but also how tormenting it is keeping this monster bottled up inside someone like Bruce. Seeing him hide away in different countries, barely able to sleep because he gets flashbacks to when he's in his Hulk form. My man can't even let his Hulk out for Betty because he might destroy the place. This is the most unfortunate part of this movie, with Liv Tyler no less. I'd be in shambles. But Bruce is constantly suffering, waking up in different countries because Hulk took him across country lines. It's something so true to the character, and I'm saddened how pushed aside the Hulk's become in the grand scheme of the MCU. I liked how Bruce tries to learn alternative ways to remain calm, like learning meditation to help ease his temperament. I also loved the days without incident counter, like it's a constant addiction he's trying to overcome. Really neat stuff. Most people forget this movie, but a huge thing people forget is Edward Norton's Bruce Banner performance. Now, I don't think it's extraordinary by any means, but you can tell how hard he pushed to tell a good enough story with this character, emphasizing the torment his character feels day in and day out. For the most part, I think he did a great job in this film. It's nothing to write home about in Oscar terms or whatever, but I do prefer the way this character is written and acted compared to where he is now.
Damn.
I find a lot of the story beats in this movie work quite well. First off, the opening sequence playing out the origin story was awesome. It wasn't overbearing, it was easy to understand, quick, and still told everyone how Bruce became the Hulk without a long origin story. Something Spider-Man Homecoming should have done.
I'm looking at porn.
Having General Ross be this constant presence looming over Bruce was great. I never realized how bad Ross is as a person, but man, he's brutal. Going after the monster that is the Hulk to harness his power and turn him into a weapon the army can use against terror is wild. And not only did he make a monster once, he made them twice. And now he's become one in Captain America. Dude is diabolical, but I find Ross to be a great villain character. You know, he wants to make another super soldier he can control and will do whatever it takes to do so. If it means shooting up Blonsky and turning him into a gangly monster, he'll do it. I find Blonsky to be okay as a character overall. I prefer Ross as the main villain. He's got power-hungry motivations, and that's pretty much it, but that's okay with me. I don't need crazy complex motivations all the time for every character for me to enjoy a simple movie. Plus, every time he fought the Hulk, whether as Abomination or Blonsky, you were in for a treat, because let me tell you something. The action is so good in this movie, man. The opening chase sequence to the first Hulk reveal in the Brazilian factory is so cool. Then the college fight sequence is a top 10 Marvel scene ever made. Seeing the Hulk design in broad daylight, dude, this design is so good and so much better than Ruffalo's, in my opinion. It's gnarly, he's ripped to shreds, he looks like an actual monster. I know it wouldn't blend with the Avengers we got, but man, this old design was peak. Plus, the transformation in the hallway leading up to that scene is just so good. And the rest of that sequence was awesome too. Seeing Hulk throw cars like they're nothing or kick Blonsky's head in from across the campus, stuff's action bliss. And don't get me started on the final fight, this shit is incredible, pun intended. I remember seeing the Hulk smash moment for the first time and losing my mind as a 6-year-old. 16 years later, and it's still the coolest thing ever. Hulk vs. Abomination is just pure big monster action, and I love it. I love watching Hulk do his classic Hulk clap, or beat Abomination up with a cop car, or using his own bone to stab him in the chest. This shit makes me kick my feet up like a giddy schoolgirl, bro. Speaking of girls, Betty Ross was great too. Liv Tyler is a wonderful actress. She's the Lady Arwen we all know and love from Lord of the Rings. But I like Betty as a character. Having an emotional connection with someone so broken like in the Hulk is hard, and I thought they showed a lot of the issues one would face trying to be with that person. I also liked her chemistry with Ross and Bruce. But a standout side character is definitely Mr. Blue or Samuel Stearns. Tim Blake Nelson works perfectly for this character, and seeing him be teased as the leader was awesome. It's a shame it never went anywhere. Criminal, even. But hey, at least this movie exists. It's truly a shame to see how disgraceful the MCU has made the Hulk. I remember being a kid and thinking he was terrifying, in a good way. I remember watching the Hulk Versus series, and seeing him getting mauled by Wolverine was terrifying as a kid, especially with Fred Tatasciore voicing him. Hearing his roars, shouting, "Hulk is strongest!" But now, I feel like kids look at this and just start making fun of him. I mean, it's crazy how disrespected he's gotten. He's gotten owned by Iron Man, gets owned by Thanos, refuses to show up again, talks like a baby, then becomes Professor Hulk, and every ounce of testosterone leaves this man's body. And then She-Hulk says Bruce has never suffered like her as a woman. This man literally tried blowing his brains out. Jesus. Anyways, I think this movie is awesome. I'd also give it an 8.5 out of 10 if I was rating it. It's incredible, and I'll defend this movie till my dying breath.
Wake up, Daddy's home.
Welcome home, son.
I feel like this movie pioneered the kind of vibe we see in modern day Marvel. Not to say this movie is horrible, but you can definitely sense the kind of humor and goofiness most modern Marvel movies have today, and I think it started here. Where the first two movies in Phase 1 feel completely isolated in tone, probably because Disney hadn't bought them yet.
You're a fake and a fraud.
This movie lightens up a lot of the story aspects where I wish it didn't. My biggest problem with this movie is its tone. For some scenes, the movie sits in Tony's existentialism. Since he's dying for half of it, you start to see how his degradation into a poorer version of himself catalyzes. He's partying, drinking, not taking care of himself, not wanting to work. I thought these feelings and scenes were great to see. However, this movie gets lost in the sauce about halfway through and becomes a comedy again, which, I mean, I don't mind, but the potential for this movie to be a darker exploration of Tony's guilt, grief, and anxiety was there, and I'd have liked to see more of that. Instead, we get this.
You know, the question I get asked most often is, Tony, how do you go to the bathroom in the suit? Just like that.
I will say moments that involve Tony reflecting on his dad's feelings for him was handled really well. Scenes like,
"What is and always will be my greatest creation is you,"
were very well done. I thought this moment was very sweet too. I also find it poetic that his dad had the blueprints for saving his kid later on down the line, which helped create a new element. Deus Ex Machina? Sure. But it was handled well. This time around, Tony is fully embracing his Iron Man persona, which means the government are trying to have him answer to them for his suits. And there's a big question of whether the suits are government property or not, which leads to copycats like Justin Hammer to try and replicate those suits so he can wipe Tony out from the competition. By doing so, he trusts Ivan Vanko to create these suits, which doesn't go as planned.
I don't know if you know this, but I don't speak Russian!
Ivan Vanko is on paper a really great bad guy for Tony. He's kind of like a mirror image of him in Russian form. Unfortunately, this movie decided to part ways with this interesting imagery and sidelines Vanko for almost 2/3 of the movie, turning him into a bumbling bird fiend, and then attacks Tony for like 2 seconds before being blown up and killed. The idea of a man being locked up for years because his father was forcefully deported by a Stark is a great idea. It could have been really interesting to see those ideas play out more. But again, this movie not being committed to a darker tone really messes up some of the plots in this. However, Sam Rockwell's Justin Hammer is top tier. I made a video a few months back talking about MCU villains that were wasted. You should go check that video out. It's really good. But I talk about how Justin Hammer is a top tier, underrated side character of the MCU. I can't believe they never brought this guy back because he is so good in this role. Another case of amazing casting. This dude plays the dumbass, smarmy business tycoon really well, and I would have loved to see this character pop up throughout the MCU more from time to time. But oh well, just another character that was wasted. Pepper was great in this as always. I liked the fact she becomes Stark Industries CEO, and her chemistry with Tony just works so well.
Oh my god, I can't take this anymore.
You can't.
I can't take this.
What do you look at me?
My body literally cannot handle the stress.
Rhodey, played by the man Don Cheadle, gets not as much screen time as I remembered in this. I swore he was in this more, but he's only in a few scenes and the final fight, and that's pretty much it. I do love how they introduce him in this movie though.
Look, it's me. I'm here. Deal with it. Let's move on.
The fight sequence in Tony's house was great, especially. This is the one scene I remember vividly from when I was a kid. That and the prop Captain America shield tease. I almost lost my mind back then. Still do. Nick Fury and Black Widow's involvement in this was a nice touch. Not much was given to them in terms of an arc, but it was a good backdoor insert for the Avengers later. I enjoyed the action in this movie. Again, the Iron Man Rhodey fight was great, and the opening Monaco fight against Whiplash is so cool. That suit up scene is damn near perfect. Black Widow's hallway fight scene was pretty cool, but honestly, I feel like it's aged not as great as I remember. I feel like other movies with her have better fight scenes, especially The Winter Soldier. The final fight in this movie was okay. I thought Whiplash getting killed so quickly was a letdown. He also became another big gray monster final boss, which was kind of boring. Overall, this movie is entertaining. I used to despise this when I was younger, but on rewatch, it's perfectly fine. Also, having seen Thor: Love and Thunder, this movie looks like a piece of art. It's fun, funny, has some great action moments, and the performances are great. Although the original is miles better, since it wasn't afraid to lean on those darker elements. I'd give Iron Man 2 a 6.5 out of 10. There are plenty of hilarious quotes from this movie though.
Drop your socks and grab your Crocs. We're about to get wet on this ride.
Yo guys, we are on the road to 10,000 subscribers, so if you like this video, please hit that subscribe button. Once we reach 10K, I'm going to be ranking all of the Harry Potter films, and that's going to be a very fun watch. So get to subscribing. Alright, back to the video.
How dare you attack the son of Odin?
I need some help.
I want to speak with whoever decided bleaching Chris Hemsworth's eyebrows was a good idea. This was the first time I've watched this movie in over 10 years. In fact, the only other time I've watched this movie was in theaters back in 2011. So it's been a minute. And so far, after rewatching the first 3 in Phase 1, I expected that most were better than I remembered. But, yeah, no, I was wrong. I couldn't get into this film no matter how hard Tom Hiddleston's great performance tried. This movie just wasn't. For starters, I'd like to say I really liked the Asgardian pieces in this movie. Everything from the set pieces to the practical effects and fight sequences was great. The first 30 minutes of this movie was really cool to me. Seeing Thor fight the Frost Giants with Loki and Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 was exciting. But the moment Thor gets sent to New Mexico, this movie loses me. I just got bored. It became hard to watch for me to watch Thor bumbling about this small town when I was first introduced to this awesome world I'd rather be spending my time in. Now, this doesn't mean the story beats in this film were entirely bad. They worked, but I just wish it was in a different area with more well-written side characters. I feel like Jane, Selvig, and Darcy have no real personality besides being science-type figures. I would have rather the side characters have more focused on Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 while Thor is exploring Asgard. So watching these science figures interact with Thor was just so boring to me. The one scene I truly liked though was when Thor and Selvig share a moment in the bar. I thought this scene was really fun and handled the more opposing viewpoints of science and magic quite well. I'll say the cast for this movie is really good though. Anthony Hopkins as Odin is a crazy good casting choice. Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 were great too, and Idris Elba as Heimdall is such a good choice. Oh my days. But without a doubt, the best casting choice was Tom Hiddleston as Loki. Tom really made the most out of a nothing burger of a movie and slayed every scene he was in. That scene he shares with Odin is top tier. Tell me! Honestly, if Tom shouted at me like he did to Odin, I'd also fall into an undeterminedly long sleep as well. He plays this slimy, tricky, deceitful character so well, but it comes across as understanding because you see how his mind got to this point. You've seen how arrogant Thor was, which would have led Asgard to a very bad spot if he was king, and you see how Odin lied for thousands of years for Loki's true heritage, and how this could mentally destroy someone for not knowing who they are for so long. That's just great stuff. Seeing Loki lie to Thor and tell him his dad was dead was heartbreaking too. Loki was easily the best part of a Thor movie. But speaking of Thor, I thought he was fine. Like, I think Chris Hemsworth is a perfect casting for him, don't get me wrong, but I just wasn't a fan of the story surrounding his character once he hit Earth. It just felt like the whole fish out of water thing, and while some parts were funny,
Drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
I got bored because the surrounding characters didn't keep me intrigued, and the New Mexico landscape was such a boring place to be. I also didn't find Natalie Portman and Chris Hemsworth characters had like any chemistry. She's kind of lusting after him from the moment they meet for no explainable reason. They don't really share any deeply character-changing moments other than the one night where he tells her about Yggdrasil and the other realms, but like, if you weren't shown that he was actually Thor later, this dude would have sounded insane. That's the one part of Selvig I enjoyed about his character. He didn't really buy the Thor stuff. I didn't really like the final battle either. The Destroyer is just another gray robot the main guy needs to fight, but the climax between Loki and Thor was really cool. But for God's sake, who decided it was a good idea to use this many Dutch angles in a single movie? If you played a drinking game for every time a Dutch angle was used in this movie, you'd need your stomach pumped. Overall, I know this movie probably has its fans, but for me, I ain't one of them. I'd give this movie a 5 out of 10. I would have preferred they kept it more Shakespearean in Asgard, developed their people more, because other than Thor, Odin, and Loki, there's no real development of Asgard and its people. Asgard feels lifeless after its first coronation scene. Again, once the movie takes you to New Mexico, it loses me. Tom Hiddleston was peak though. Best part of the movie, hands down.
Yeah, I had a date.
Why am I ready to cry? Damn, man. This movie was incredible on rewatch. When I was a kid, I didn't appreciate this movie enough. I think it was mostly because it was set in World War II, and my young brain didn't see the super flashy colors of most superhero movies at the time, so I kind of tuned it out. And to be fair, most of the comic community also did, because it wasn't until Winter Soldier where Cap got his dues. But man, I'm glad my brain has developed, because this movie made me feel things, man. It truly feels like a love letter to wartime heroes, but also, this movie is a romance movie at its center. The relationship between Steve and Peggy is beautifully done, with both Chris Evans and Haley Atwell giving stellar performances. But it's also heartbreaking knowing that Steve ends up in the future without...
Right partner.
Again, this final line hits like a ton of bricks after you see them build their relationship up throughout the whole movie. I also loved how they met before Steve became Captain America, because their values were shared even before he became super strong. But this movie also incorporates friendship into it as well. Seeing the bond Steve and Bucky have pre-Winter Soldier was sweet, and it's nice to remember a time when Bucky wasn't tormented by his assassin days, and just see him and Steve having fun together, or building their relationship as friends too. The Howling Commandos was great, and you get a diverse set of characters in there too. Honestly, Cap gets a lot of memes about him being racist, but like, this was his squad back in the 40s. He was more inclusive than most people nowadays. Truly, this film shines in its scripting though, which was written brilliantly by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely. If you feel like you know those names, well, it's because they wrote almost every Avengers movie and Captain America film. But I really like what they did with Steve. Watching Steve go from a skinny, looked down upon soldier looking to fight for the little guy was awesome. I really love this line.
I don't want to kill anyone. I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from.
Because this isn't a film about a man looking at the war in a way where he can murder a bunch of people to feel something. No, he looks at it as a way to stand up for those being sworn down upon, and using his strength to push back and say no to fascism or terrorism. Watching that growth through the lens of World War II was incredible to watch. I loved the 1940s aesthetic this film has to it, catered with beautiful cinematography to bolster certain scenes like the war montage with the Howling Commandos, the Captain America World Tour, or the warmly lit texture of the soldiers just sitting in a bar, or the massive wide shots to display Hydra's armies. I just loved everything about it, something I didn't really appreciate fully when I was younger. The self-contained nature of Phase 1 is so nice to watch, and it shines in this movie particularly. I love how grounded it is. Yes, the Tesseract is a major part of the final act, but it doesn't feel too cartoonish to me. I guess after watching Thor, I was just aware of it, but even if I didn't, I'd feel like the movie explained the process of this cube well enough, and the nature of the world seemed acquainted with other worldly possessions, so it didn't feel out of place. Speaking of great performances, Hugo Weaving is a boss of an actor. Although Red Skull can seem like a basic villain on paper, I think he worked wonderfully. He mirrored Cap in a way that wasn't just, oh, he's Cap but bad. He challenged Cap's philosophy on war and power, and was threatening to anyone he talked to. I liked how his backstory mirrored Cap's, in a way that Stanley Tucci's wonderfully performed Dr. Erskine explained.
The serum amplifies everything that is inside, so good becomes great. Bad becomes worse.
Erskine and Steve's scenes were wonderful too. Marvel really had the best characters influence their heroes and then had them die right away. The action was handled really well too. I like seeing Cap's progression as a fighter throughout the MCU, where he starts off as a brute, just using his newfound strength to take people out, and then more of a boxer in the Avengers, since that's what he trained. And then as he worked with S.H.I.E.L.D, he became more lethal, doing more acrobatic moves since his skill set was monitored more. Just cool stuff. Overall, this movie was the most surprising one to rewatch so far. I really underappreciated this movie back in the day, and I'm glad I can give it its flowers today. Joe Johnston killed it with this movie, and I give this movie a 9 out of 10. I love the vibe, the aesthetic, the acting, and action. Really well made movie.
You have no idea what you're dealing with.
Shakespeare in the Park?
Doth mother know you weareth her drapes?
Man, it's crazy going back to the original Avengers movie. I remember seeing this movie like 3 times in theaters back when it first came out. It feels like yesterday. Wait, this movie is 13 years old? What? Anyways, even to this day, this movie is so much fun when you watch all of the previous movies building to it. It feels like such a monumental step for this franchise. And again, it's nice to go back to something simpler. Since the scale of these movies got so grand, it's wild to remember that something like the Avengers was considered grand scale. But at the time it was. However, looking at it now, it's nice to sit back and remember what it was like seeing the 6 OG Avengers take on an army by themselves in New York City. It's just so iconic. Now with that being said, rewatching this film years later, I think it's still a very fun movie. The movie rides on that campy side of things with some goofy dialogue between characters, which is kind of heartwarming. And I don't mean goofy in a bad way either. It didn't make me cringe like most MCU dialogue became later on down the line, but more so in a comic booky kind of way that I enjoyed.
Monkeys. I do not understand.
I do. I understood that reference.
The characters in the film are great. Every single one is exactly where they left off emotionally from their standalone movies. And making those kinds of emotions work together in unison was great to watch. Scenes like the one in the helicarrier where Fury and the Avengers are arguing was intense, but very well handled. I also love this dialogue to death.
You're a laboratory experiment, Rogers. Everything special about you came out of a bottle.
I mean, any sort of interaction with the Avengers is just great. From Thor fighting half the Avengers by himself, to Steve and Tony talking about soldiers, to Clint and Nat having a heart-to-heart after Clint isn't manipulated anymore. All of this stuff is just great. It helps that Tom Hiddleston's Loki is just a sight to see. As much as I like him though, I've never felt that Loki was that great of a villain in this film. Don't shoot me, hear me out. I always saw him as a tortured soul rearing for a comeback, and he eventually did. So when I rewatch these movies, I kind of think like, how did anyone ever find him villainous? Yeah, there's the offhand comment Black Widow says about him killing 80 people in 2 days, but when you're told a villain is bad, it doesn't really make me see him as bad. However, Hiddleston's performance is so good anyway. I can't imagine having to be dressed in that kind of outfit and then performing as well as he does in that scene with Black Widow.
I won't touch Barton, not until I make him kill you. Slowly.
Chills. Many moments from this movie give me that feeling. Hulks.
I'm always angry.
When the Avengers do that circle shot, when the final battle does a one take between every Avenger fighting the Chitauri, when Thor fights Hulk, I could go on. It's a nerd's dream. However, I don't think this film is perfect. What? Like I said, some dialogue is hit or miss. Also, the cinematography is very bland in this movie. Take a shot from any of the films before this and compare it to this. The Avengers is considerably worse. It's a very beige, gray looking film, especially coming off the cinematography glory that was the first Avenger. Yeah, I was kind of disappointed a bit. The movie comes off as looking like a stage play in some shots too. Also, the whole blowing up the entire city with a nuke is so stupid to this day. The government in these superhero movies are just hilariously bad. But in all honesty, it was still really fun going back to this movie and seeing them team up for the first time again. And although there's some issues I have with it, it's still an enjoyable time throughout. I give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. Also, the Avengers theme is so iconic. I was hyped as hell hearing it during the circle shot. Before I wrap up the video, I wanted to give out some random awards no one really asked for these movies, but I just felt like doing it anyway. With best movie, we have Iron Man. With worst movie, we have Thor. Most underrated movie, The Incredible Hulk. Movie that surprised me the most, Captain America: The First Avenger. Most accurately rated film, Iron Man. And my personal favorite of these Phase 1 movies was The First Avenger. I love this movie way more than I was expecting. That final line, man.
I had a date.
Tears. It's crazy to think how long ago Phase 1 was. Nearing 13 years as I'm recording this. It was a blast going back and rewatching the start of something so monumental even to this day. Although it's fallen from the peak it once had, who knows where we'll be once Avengers Doomsday comes rearing its head next year, or when Fantastic Four drops. There might be a huge resurgence in the MCU. But to look back at Phase 1 and say one word for it, it's grounded. I love how self-contained each film felt. The more mature themes the films were trying to tell you. How humor didn't force itself into every frame. How CGI artists were given the time to make these movies look beautiful. In a time when patience was a virtue. 6 movies came out in the span of 4 years. Phase 3 had 9 movies in 3. God knows where we're at with shows and stuff now, and the fact we're in Phase 5, it's crazy. But to answer my question posed in the title of the video, was the MCU Phase 1 actually good? Hell yeah! I'll be rewatching most of these movies from this phase for sure, and I can't lie when I say after doing this, it's made me want to watch the rest of the films to Endgame. Maybe if y'all like this video enough, we'll do an MCU ranking for 100k subscribers. Who knows? Who knows? But here's my overall ranking of the movies. Let me know what you think down below. And while you're down there, please hit that subscribe button. I love making these videos, but they do take a long time to make. So the best thing you guys could do if you like the channel is just hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 10k, so if you want to become a part of the community before we do that, now's the time to do so. Also, a like on this video would be mad appreciated. It pushes it out to more people like you who like these kinds of videos. Follow my Instagram and TikTok. Your boy will start posting regularly on there throughout 2025. So if you want to keep up with me, head on over there. I also just started a Letterboxd too, so you can see what I think of a film before I either release a video. Anyways, that is all from me today, guys. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.